Brad actually thought he wasn't coming home from that time. He rented me a house with the option to buy in case he didn't return. So that's kind of a scary way to say goodbye to your husband if he is not confident he's going to make it.
Kiss me goodbye and write me while I'm gone. Goodbye, my sweetheart. Hello, Vietnam.
I was born in Tullahoma, Tennessee, December 27th, 1940. Tullahoma, Tennessee was a very small little town when I was born, about 3,000 people. The first child to my parents, Mildred and Merle. I was very loved on and very loved. Brad was born September 11th, 1937. John Bradford Oliver Jr. was the name he was given for his father, of course. I was a senior in high school when Brad and I met. It was on a Tuesday night, April Fool's Day, and the phone rang. And it was one of my former teachers saying that the lady that she lives with, Mrs. Frances Smotherman, Brad's grandmother, she was a teacher and lived in her home, rented a room from her. Her nephew, Brad, was there, and they wanted to know if I could go on a blind date that night. Well, I had never been on a blind date before.
The reason I was in Tullahoma, I was actually born and raised in Lebanon, Tennessee. That's the home of the Cracker Barrels. And things didn't work out well there, and my grandmother's home, my mother's mother, was our sanctuary. And we always went there, my sisters and myself, and I came back there. My Uncle Paul Smotherman was there, and he was running the family business, wholesale grocery business, the old Camp Forest in Lebanon, Tennessee, and then in Arnold Center now up in Tullahoma, basically had an officers club. And you could go there and have a supper. There was a particular teacher who taught literature, and she walked in the front door. My uncle called her by name and had her come back, and she said, "That's exactly what we need to talk to." He said, "Who is somebody that Brad Jr. could have a date with?" And in about 3 seconds, she said, "Gail Weddington, I think." And then Gail told me later, she said, "I hadn't had her for a teacher in 2 years. I don't know how she pulled me out." When I got to Germany and got off that ship, I'd written her 90 pages, and I mailed that in 3 envelopes, and she finally got that. And she went off to school, and she was a head majorette as a freshman at Tennessee Polytechnic Institute. I told her, I said, "I don't expect you to sit and wait for me. You're a head majorette in college as a freshman and all of this stuff, and you sitting waiting for some that gum GI coming from Bamberg, Germany." I said, I don't want you to miss out."
He was on his way to Germany in a few days. So we had 3 dates before he went, and before he left, he had already proposed to me, and I had already taken his ring. I wrote him twice a day because I really liked him. I don't know, I guess you'd say it was love at first sight.
She was part of my whole career. Our girls were born while I was in the Army. We moved 19 times in 21 years, either individually or collectively.
This was when I was still in Okinawa, and it was the first 5 months before I came back to the States. And he came in the door, and I hardly recognized him. He came just to see Jenny and I. She was just a little baby, and he came in the door, and he looked so thin and so bad, just, I don't know how to say it, just really tired, and he just looked so different. I hardly knew him. And I just knew it had been such a stress for him that I had no idea what he'd been going through, but he was just so glad to see us that he just actually cried. So we just tried to make it a happy time. And I did know of some casualties in his unit in the 173rd. It would be in the paper. When I was in Okinawa, it would be in the paper. And I would see that, and so it was just extremely sad and scary. And I would turn on the news, and I would see the 173rd in combat. It was just such a far cry from the way war was before, that they would be out filming the unit. And the newsmen would ask, but they never interviewed Brad. His particular company was never interviewed, thankfully. But it was very scary when you heard of someone either getting wounded or killed. I felt like an unwed mother, I guess you might say, because I was in the hospital, and you're only allowed, or were at this hospital only allowed so many visitors, and my parents came, but just not having him there, and I couldn't talk to him. We just send him a Red Cross message. We exchanged little cassette tapes, and that helped, but I'm sure it was really hard for him. The biggest challenge probably was just missing him. And Jenny had all kinds of emotional problems. She was 4, but here she has a new sister. Her dad's not there. She's just gotten used to him from being gone the first time, and she just decided she likes him, and then he leaves her again. And she didn't understand Army, the war, or anything. The second time he went to Vietnam, it was in '68, and that was a very accelerated part of the war. And I worried about him not coming home. And I think he was worried too, because he got me a house to rent with the option to buy if he should not come home. He was just trying to cover all his bases and feel like he was taking care of us. I was pregnant with Susie. And I did worry, but I just tried to pray. I would pray when I was just walking around, please keep him safe, and send tapes and just trust that he would be smart. I think the most difficult thing was just the attitude of the people, not having respect for your husband being a soldier and fighting for their country, and there not being a sense of patriotism or understanding of why they were doing it. And that was difficult for me to understand, because I remembered, even though I was a very small child when World War II was going on, the country just rallied behind, and we saved all of our cans and all of our things, and nobody had hose, or nobody had material, and they just did without, and were so patriotic and so appreciative of the soldier, and it was just completely different. I remember going to the post office the second time he was there when Susie was born, and I left crying, because the man who sold me my stamps was so mean when he saw I was mailing something to my husband. What in the world? He's there for the second time. He must be some kind of weird hawk who wants to kill everybody. And how could he do that? And it just really hurt to think that fellow Americans were not supported. You didn't tell people where your husband was. They might ask you, and you might be brave enough to tell them, but you didn't tell people outside of your family, because they might rock your house or throw eggs at it or do something horrible to your car, or you just didn't know what, because your husband was in Vietnam fighting the war. My husband was just doing his job as a military soldier who had trained to protect our country, and he's a very patriotic person, and whatever the person who was president and the Congress, decided that we would do as far as the war, he as a military man wanted to do his part and do it the very best he could. But I didn't ever tell him, because I didn't want to upset him. What can you do? He's half a world away. We saved all our Vietnam letters. We didn't save our tapes because we recorded over them. We would try to make one every day or every other day, and it was like, it took 30 minutes, I think, to make one.
Every once in a while, we could go out, and we had a VSC1 radio. You could get a radio, and we'd line up, and we'd get about 2 minutes, minute and a half to 2 minutes to talk what we're going to do. And they would call and get yelled on the phone, and I'd say, honey, it's me, over, and you have to say over, and he throws a switch. And that lets her talk. She can talk, and it comes to me, and then she says over. Then he throws a switch, and then I can talk back. So you each get about maybe 15 or 20 lines, and that's it. I said, how's the baby doing? How you doing? She said, honey, I'm fine. I'm fine. She never, ever said she's mad or tired to us. And I had a lot of young lieutenants and sergeants who their wives just didn't want any more of it, and they got them with divorces up in the zoo. Too many. And Gail said, I'm just fine. We're doing fine. You just take care of yourself.
He was not wounded, fortunately, 3 times, so that was a miracle. God was watching after him for sure. And I heard him tell the story when he started talking about Vietnam, about, I think it was either the second or maybe the third time, no, it was the second time he was there, that something just told him to go outside and check the perimeter, and they had just gotten a different kind of a gun to protect themselves, and they were being overrun that night, and they had a huge firefight, and that could have really, they had several loss of life that night. I think if you make it through combat, especially 3 different years, you're very, very fortunate. He didn't talk about it at all for decades. Not at all. He would say, if someone said, "Were you in Vietnam?" Yes. He didn't tell me anything about it. He didn't talk about any of the fighting or anything at all. And only after Jenny gave him a Vietnam veteran shirt one year, and she gave him a hat too. And he wears that hat now everywhere he goes. It's like, if he can't find it, he gets all upset. And then gradually he began talking about things.
Gail's not extravagant. She doesn't ask for the world. She's very happy with basic things. She's a great mother, and I'll tell you what, you can't ask for a better friend. If you want a friend, there's one right up there in that house. And you love her, she'll love you double. Who you marry is so important, and it's always got to be a we thing, and it's a two-way street. And I've always said that. And you gotta. Gail knows it right now. I love my wife right now as much as I ever did the first time I laid eyes on her. And the first time I laid eyes on her was sitting in that house waiting for her to come down that hallway for that first blind date. She came around the corner, and I said to myself, "Oh my God, look at this, look at this." And she is a wonderful person. And all my time in the career, in the military career, she never complained about what the Army was trying to do. She would listen to me say what I did, maybe care about some things, but she would just listen to it and say, "Well, we'll be all right. We're gonna be fine. Everything will be fine." And it was. Does she love me with all her heart? Should I worry when we're apart? It's a lover's question I'd like to know. When I went to pick her up, I had the radio on. It was on the car. It was on low. I mean, we could talk. But that was the song that was playing. The minute we backed up, and that was the moment that I did it. I looked at her and I said, "Would you marry me?" And she looked at me and she said, "Yes, I'll marry you." I'd like to know, does she need me as she pretends? Is this a game? Well, will I win? It's a lover's question I'd like to know.
I'd like to know when she's not with me, if she's still true to me. I'd like to know when we're kissing, does she feel just what I feel? And how am I to know it's really real? Oh, tell me where